good to see you out here today, and I am honored to be here with such an impressive group of women. I want to officially welcome all of you here today for this conversation with Jewish female leaders sponsored by the Jewish Business Network, JBN. And so we want to begin with our first speaker. I want to introduce Leslie Richards. She is the first woman to serve as the Secretary of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, lovingly known as PennDOT. Secretary Richards, who's been recognized for her leadership in the industry and her commitment to public service, makes sure to take time to speak about the importance of women occupying roles in public service and transportation. Secretary Richards.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can everyone hear me on the mic? It's great to be here. I just had to, I had a little moment with Emma here with me as well. We have, a fifth of the PennDOT minion is here. It's been fantastic to represent the governor, to be part of his cabinet, and to represent an agency that literally touches every single resident of Pennsylvania many times a day, whether you're walking on sidewalks or flying somewhere or eating food that's been shipped on our freight carriers. We have ports, we have roads, we have bridges, we have rail and freight, and all the transit agencies as well come under our responsibility. It is over $10 billion. We have over 11,500 employees, and again, it is my total honor to be here. Given that platform, I just want to give you a little bit about my background and things that I've been able to do, which I didn't really anticipate. First of all, I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and it's great to see the back table because there's a back table of women who our kids, were in Sally's Music Circle and Little Gym and doing all these little things, and now our kids, all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, are college graduates, and it's always nice to see them. I have some friends here from Hadassah as well, which was an organization. It was really the first organization I was ever in that associated me with a leader. They're the ones who identified that I had some leadership qualities, and I was very happy to get some training through them. So very quickly, my background is in environmental science. I came to transportation studying water and air quality issues. I actually worked in this building, and the Central Philadelphia Development Corporation was housed here. I was dealing with air quality issues, carpooling issues, trying to help Philadelphia employers cut down on trips and encourage transit use. From there, after we had 3 kids, I went back to work part-time for an environmental engineering firm. And while I was there, I had become very involved in my community when I was a stay-at-home mom. I was helped with our township day. I was then asked to join our Park and Rec Board, our Planning Commission, and run for township supervisor in White Marsh Township. It was the networks that I formed while I was a stay-at-home mom, but also my Jewish networks that really propelled me, allowed me to raise money. After being in Hadassah, you know how to raise money, you know how to talk to people. There's nothing more political than I've ever done in my life than be the president of a Hadassah group. That's very tough stuff, and also being an officer at the chapter level. So it was wonderful. I had a great opportunity there to our delight and surprise. We won the majority for the first time, and in the township. I then put my name in for county commissioner after lobbying them for open space funds and seeing no one who looked like me representing me at the county. And put my name in there. Luckily, didn't realize what a hard road that was to run for elected office. I ran as a team. And we raised $2.4 million, and it was a huge race. I had to explain to my children why there were black and white photos of me on the television calling me unethical and, a tax and spend liberal. It was a good lesson for all of us. And again, we won the majority in Montgomery County for the first time in 140 years, and I was thrilled to be there. And again, it was my Jewish network that really helped me there as well. Within a few months, I had more money in my political war chest than a former congressman who wanted the endorsement over me. So again, I'm very grateful to everybody for believing in me, and the support that I had got me here. While I was a county commissioner and working in a civil engineering firm, I met a gentleman by the name of Tom Wolf. He ran for governor. we he became a big supporter of mine, which I was very grateful for. And I offered to help him in any way I could. And he asked if I would be interested in being on his cabinet. Wasn't really sure where. And I said, look, I'll do whatever I can to help. I was vetted. It was very competitive. I don't mean to seem like it was handed to me. It's tough, and I can go into the details of what it's like to be vetted as a state cabinet member. But I'm thrilled to be here and to be able to do certain things and to be able to do it as the first female, first planner, and in many ways I'm often the first Jewish person people have met as I travel through Pennsylvania, and it's truly my honor.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Amy Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg is professor and chair of the Department of Surgery at the Lewis Katz School of Medicine and surgeon-in-chief at Temple University Health System. Dr. Goldberg is nationally recognized for her contributions to violence prevention and improved outcomes for victims of trauma. She received Temple University's highest teaching award in 2018, the Great Teacher Award, and she is the newly elected director of the American Board of Surgery. Dr. Goldberg graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in psychology, very helpful at Temple, I'm sure, and received her medical degree from Mount Sinai and then completed her residency at Temple. Dr. Goldberg.
So thank you so much for allowing me to participate this afternoon. I'm really very honored. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, south and west of here in Broomall. Anybody know Broomall? Yay, okay. I was a Marple Newtown Tiger, so I went to the public schools in the Marple Newtown School District. I think one of the most significant things that happened to me, which I was really quite fortunate, was that I went to Camp Ramah when I was 10 turning 11. People know Ramah?
Yay.
Yay. So I knew it was special. I enjoyed those 6 weeks a ton. I didn't really realize how special Ramah was, probably, like any young kid, until after they leave there. I spent a decade at Ramah, 6 years as a camper, 1 summer going to Israel, and then 3 years as a counselor. And then, as Stephanie said, I went to college at Penn where I was a psych major. It helps with all the surgeons, not just at Temple. Helps with getting those surgeons in line. Also, I went to medical school at Mount Sinai, and I think it was there in medical school that I really loved anatomy. It was just miraculous, and it was such a privilege to be able to see the lungs and the heart and the bowels. And I know you've all eaten and all, so I won't do anything too gory, but it was really a miracle. And I think it's we learned about a lot of miracles at Ramah. There are a lot of miracles that happen every day, but this was really a miracle for me. And I thought, what, I want to be a surgeon, because that's what surgery is all about, is really about anatomy. And I was really so fortunate to match at Temple University Hospital for my general surgery residency. I knew nothing about North Philadelphia. In fact, I will date myself and say that the only thing I knew about North Philadelphia was Connie Mack Stadium. So a shout out to all of us that sat at Connie Mack Stadium for those twilight doubleheaders with Robin Roberts, who was a pitcher back then. And I learned a lot at Temple, and so much more than medicine and surgery. I was introduced to a community that I didn't even know existed. And I'm a little ashamed to have said that. I mean, I didn't really know about North Philadelphia and its community. And I, learned how to be a surgeon, but I learned about poverty, and I learned about violence. And I think, from my days at Ramah, and as Jews, we're supposed to be responsible, right? Not just for our own community, but for those that can't speak for themselves. And it felt right for me to be at Temple. So after my 5 years of general surgery residency, I went to Baltimore, Maryland for a year and did a trauma surgery fellowship, and then came back to Temple Hospital in 1993 as a trauma surgeon. And that was the only thing I ever wanted. Now, my best friend Andrea says to me, don't tell people that, they'll take you for granted, Temple. They don't, and I'm just every day thankful for working there. I would say that the leadership positions that I've had from 1993 to the present, none of them I went after. None of them I intentionally sought, nor was kind of intentionally given the job. So I became the program director of the residency, and I did that for over 10 years after the program director left to go and be chair. And I was the associate program director, and the chair said, do you want to do the job? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do the job. And I ran the residency for about 10 plus years. It was really just like being a camp counselor, just teaching a different skill. Then all of a sudden, I was a trauma surgeon again all those years, and our chief of trauma, who had a significant impact on me in wanting to be a trauma surgeon, he was there when I was a surgical resident, he had resigned. He wrote a letter of resignation thinking that the chair wouldn't take it. The chair took it. He left suddenly, and the chair came to me and said, will you be the interim chief of trauma? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll be the interim chief of trauma. And we were looking to recruit somebody else back to be the chief of trauma at Temple. And after a year plus, and that guy couldn't sign the contract, I walk into the chair's office and I said, you know what? You don't need to look anymore. I'll be your chief of trauma. And whatever deal you were going to give him, you can give me and I'll take it. So I became the chief of trauma. And I did that also for over a decade as well. Then we had a new chair. We had our chair left, and we had a new chair come. I, again, had absolutely no intention of applying to be the chair of the Department of Surgery. Our new chair came for about 2 years, really didn't like it. He left. I stepped up to be the interim chair, and then again, after about a year, I went to Dr. Kaiser and said, if you'll have me, I'd like to serve at the pleasure of the dean, and I'd like to be your chair of the Department of Surgery. So, to a certain extent, I'm a terrible example of having a goal and going after it. I'm a perfect example of following your heart. And, they talk about in leadership just doing your job. And if you do your job well, maybe you'll get your next job. We're not supposed to be doing our next jobs. We're supposed to be doing those jobs. So I was really very fortunate. As I said, my time at Ramah and my Judaism is with me all the time. Some days at work I will wear it on my sleeve, and I don't know if that's fair to everybody, but I guess at times I don't really care. So when I'm making rounds in the surgical intensive care unit and the residents are giving too much saline, salt water, I say to them, you're going to turn that patient into Lot's wife, right? Because, she turned back and became a pillar of salt, I'll go to the operating room and I'll do a tracheostomy, and as we go through the thyroid gland, and all of a sudden you see the beautiful white of the trachea. It's like the parting of the Red Sea, and I'll say, oh, it's the parting of the Red Sea, and I'm sure people look at me like, what? It's Goldberg, whatever. But it is something that I carry with me. Again, the 30 years that I've spent in that in the community, in my community up in North Philly, it's my responsibility. I think that saying of, they came for the socialists and I didn't speak up, and they came for whatever and I didn't speak up, and they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up, and then they came for me and nobody was there to speak up. God, I take that seriously. And I drive up Broad Street every day. And then I could touch upon my 25 years as a fully trained trauma surgeon and the number of people that I've taken care of and the number of young men I've seen die. And sometimes I'm the last face they see. And sometimes I look in their eyes and I tell them they'll be fine. And sometimes when I'm really haunted, I think about, boy, I really do hope their soul has left before we do the things that we do to them. And I think that is my Ramah upbringing, and I think that's my praying that we did for, whatever it was, 10 years, 3 days, every morning, Shacharit and Shabbos 3 times, and doing the Amidah. I think I carry that with me in all that I do. So So that's a little bit about me. Happy at some point to answer any questions, but again, very honored to be here today. So thank you.
And our final speaker is Susanna Lachs Adler. She is the new board chair of the Philadelphia Federation of Greater Philadelphia. Congratulations. Susanna is especially committed to connecting the next generation of young adults to Jewish life, having been raised in a family dedicated to supporting Jewish causes. A graduate of Temple University's Beasley School of Law and the University of Pennsylvania's Annenberg School of Communication, Susanna is a passionate advocate for higher education. And after 22 years as a commercial litigator in Philadelphia, she chose to dedicate herself to community leadership. She met her husband, Dean Adler, on a Jewish Federation mission to Israel, and they have 2 daughters. Susanna.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome to everyone. It is my honor to be on this panel with these 2 amazing women. Amy and I met serving on the search committee for the head of the Temple University Health System when I was on the board of Temple University. We were the only women, I should add, on the search committee, and we had the benefit of being able to go to the ladies' room together to talk about the candidates, resulting in the hiring of Dr. Larry Kaiser, who has been a mentor and leader for you, Amy. I know that. We got to meet over lunch at the introduction of Sue Jacobson. Thank you, Sue, and just had the most amazing conversation with so many common bonds in our Jewish community, but in particular meeting our husbands on trips to Israel.
Oh, sorry I left that out.
Yes.
I had a relationship. I should have led with that.
That's okay.
So thanks for
But
that.
see, the double mitzvah of not only going to Eretz Yisrael, but meeting your spouse, like how bashirat is that? So all good. So it's also my honor to be representing all of you as members of the Greater Philadelphia Jewish community as the chair of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. I have with me 2 of our outstanding professionals, Melissa Greenberg, who is our Director of Development, and Marnie Greenberg Davis, who is head of our Women's Philanthropy Group. And we work together very, very closely. And I'll give you a little additional background from my bio and kind of how I got to this spot today. I grew up in a conservative Jewish family in the suburbs of Philly and ultimately moved into Center City. My father was a conservative rabbi, Rabbi Samuel Lachs, Alav Shalom. Some of you may know him from teaching at Gratz College, where he was for many, many years. He had a small congregation in West Oak Lane, Philadelphia, and we were just brought up with Shabbat and observing all the holidays and had the benefit of a great Jewish education. I'm a product not only of Jewish Day School. I went to Solomon Schechter for some of my early school years. Then I was in public school in Springfield, Montgomery County, and then Quaker school in Center City, Philadelphia at Friends Select School. So I just have had a really nice blend, and in every synagogue that we belonged to after my father went and became an academic and was no longer the shul rabbi of my shul, I went to Gratz College, the Hebrew high school, and the college, and actually had my father as a teacher, not only at home, but at Gratz. So I did a lot of Talmud study, Mishnah, Gemara, Pirkei Avot. Those were his fields. And my mother and father were both in academia and were professors at Bryn Mawr College. But we always had a very observant Jewish home. I, too, am a product of Camp Ramah. It's amazing to have 2 of us. I have to tell the Camp Ramah people. They'll be so excited. But I do want to echo the Devar Torah of today and talk about the leaders who have most impacted me and have really been the ones that have been most formative, in addition to my parents, whom I mentioned. My mother, after 4 children, went back and got her PhD and taught history for many, many years at Bryn Mawr and was always a working mom. And I'm one of 4 children, and somehow, between my parents, my grandparents, and our extended family, everybody had a lot of love, but everybody was always working. So those were my first role models in work-life balance. I became a lawyer after attending Penn and graduate school at Penn. Undergrad, I was an English major, not a psych major. I don't think you're much younger than I am. And I got my master's in communication and ended up at Temple University Law School, and also discovered, even though I was a city girl by then, living in both West Philly for Penn and living in North Philly and going to school there, you get to know the extended community outside of your little bubble very quickly. And now, the 0 to 60, I now represent 5 counties, right? Philadelphia, Montgomery, Bucks, Delaware, and Chester County, where the Jewish community has just spread and evolved and is growing, thankfully. But my first job out of law school was a judge in the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia in City Hall, also a big education. And then I went to what was then a traditional Jewish law firm, because in the old days, not all of the Jewish lawyers were admitted to practicing law in the traditionally non-Jewish law firms. And I had the privilege, really, of being first an associate and then a partner at Cohen Shapiro, Polisher, Sheikman & Cohen, nice Jewish law firm. Lots of Cohens, lots of Jewish lawyers. And Sylvan Cohen, whom some of you may recall from the older days of community leadership, was the managing partner. And it was a requirement and part of the culture of the firm that you had to be involved in some way in the community. Whether it was the Jewish community, the secular community, if that was your choice, but everyone had to do something in the community. And I gravitated, of course, to the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia, not only because some of the lawyers in my firm were already involved with it, but because it just felt right. They did great work. They raised money for not only the needy in our community, people who were hungry, people who needed special services, working with Jewish identity, working with Jewish camping, working with Jewish day schools and youth groups, which really was part of my life. Hillel, supporting Hillel at the various schools and colleges, of which we have so many in Philadelphia, but also their work in Israel. And Sylvan was really one of my early leaders, because he recognized qualities in myself and came to me and said, we are sending one lawyer every year on a leadership trip to Israel, and we are asking you to represent our firm and be that leader. And in 1985, that was the year I went to Israel and Zachor, and I met my husband, Dean Adler, also a great leader in his professional life. And the rest is history. We've been married for 32 years, and the investment that the Jewish Federation and my law firm made in me as a leader has brought me here today. I was involved in what we called then Young Leadership, which is now called something else, but which we do with our next gen group of 20s and 30s. I've been a member of Young Leadership Cabinet. At that time, there was a women's cabinet and a men's cabinet throughout the United States, and we met our peers in other Jewish communities. It is now one big leadership cabinet. I did that for a number of years. I was involved in the Young Lawyers Division at Federation, then the Lawyers Division, and of course with Women's Philanthropy. And I have made the most amazing friendships and just great networking. I see all of you seem to know one another. You get up, you introduce yourselves each time, but it looks like you see each other at these gatherings and welcome new members. And that's how I feel about the relationships that I formed at the Jewish Federation. So after practicing law and our children were getting older, I got involved in their school at the Shipley School in Bryn Mawr. Somehow I found myself as the board chair, which I did for 3 years. And of course, coming from a family in which my parents were teachers, I gravitated to education. But I've always served in some capacity as a leader at the Jewish Federation. And I actually raised my hand for this one to be the chair of the search committee for our new CEO, relatively new now, but not so brand new, Naomi Adler. No relation, by the way. Adler is my married name. My husband is from Cleveland, also a wonderful Jewish community. And when he interviewed Naomi, I always tell this story that I kept thinking how outstanding she was, and I thought I could see the Jewish Exponent headline, Adler hires Adler, but it's really Naomi's maiden name and my married name. But it was really just a terrific opportunity to kind of reboot what we were looking for in a communal leader. And it's the first time we have had in Greater Philadelphia a Jewish woman CEO. There have been male CEOs, but not women CEOs. I am not the first board chair who was a woman, but I am preceded by a number of other outstanding women for which I've had the great privilege of learning from whom I've had the great privilege of learning. So that, I feel that some of the jobs have come to me, I think because I'm good at showing up and being participatory. And I think that's just kind of a product of being in a family where you just had to be participatory and always be learning, and I'm very curious. But I also feel that in some cases where I've raised my hand and stepped forward, it's because I have felt the obligation that I think we all feel as Jews, that we need to take care of one another. And like Moshe, that we all have an obligation, Kol Yisrael, Arevim Ze Lazeh, and we all have an obligation to take care of Klal Yisrael. So I do feel that strongly, and I know my father, who's been gone for many years, is always standing on my shoulder and showing me the way. So thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to open this up for some questions. So do we have, that's for you. So does anybody have questions for our panel? Questions?
Yes, do you try to pass on leadership skills or notion about being responsible for others in respect to your children?
Absolutely. What I've found interesting is sometimes we pass things on and we don't even know, that we're passing things on. I'll just share two very recent things that happened literally 2 days ago. One is my youngest is a senior in high school, and she's getting ready to take AP Gov. And 3 of her girlfriends came over, and I happened to be working from home that afternoon, and they rush into my office and they say, we had to answer this survey, school's starting in a couple days, and Becca knows all the answers. And I said, I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, they just asked us really bizarre questions, like how many votes are in the Electoral College? How does a law get through committee and then get onto the floor? And Becca started spouting all these answers, and Becca just looked at me and said, well, we live this. And we do. We live it. I've had issues that have been very difficult to fight for and to bring up. I'm like the 2 other panelists here, I'm not scared to bring things up, and I'm often the one that does bring things up. I do feel it's our responsibility. I'm always talking about how people are putting up votes and what certain legislators, I don't always speak in positive terms of why they do certain things. But try to explain, try to see the other side, why they have to answer to certain constituents, what's on the line, how you work something through. Someone gave me very good advice once, and that is that logic and rational thinking have nothing to do with what goes on in the Capitol. And it is true. Strategic thinking, you have to be on your feet and figure out how things move through and see how you can help that happen. And so it's not always an easy thing. So again, you do things by example. They see certain things, and again, you're not always aware of them. And then the other thing, something that happened 2 years ago, and I wasn't truly aware of it. I had the opportunity to go to Australia, and it was to represent the United States. 6 people from the United States were invited to talk about autonomous and connected vehicles and where we are with self-driving cars and what's happening to this international audience. The invitation was during Yom Kippur, the week of Yom Kippur. I so happened to be meeting with a good friend of mine who is the rabbi's wife. Many of you may have known her, Linda Greif, and may her memory be a blessing. I happened to be having lunch with her that morning. I said, can you imagine, this is my luck. I'm invited to Australia, which is a place I've always wanted to go my entire life, but it's during Yom Kippur. And she's looking at me, so, what's the problem? And I said, I can't go. I can't be away from my family. And she said, they have Jews in Australia. They have synagogues in Australia. If you need to work, I said, no, I would never work, but I could speak on my panels the day before. I could join them after. And so we worked through a plan. And Linda, very sadly ended up passing away before I got to make that trip. But when I did make the trip, I felt like she was with me. I spent Yom Kippur with an amazing Orthodox community. I'm not Orthodox. I was raised conservative, and it was just wonderful. But when I came back to the conference the next day, a bunch of people from the United States came up because it was a big day that I had missed. In fact, it was the biggest day of the conference, And because I had been outspoken at the conference, and this is a conference with over 12,000 people, I mean, it's not, but because I'd been outspoken on one of the major keynote plenary panels of the conference, my absence was noted. And they said, "We heard you went to synagogue yesterday." And I said, "Of course I did. I was observing Yom Kippur." And with tears in their eyes, some of them said, "I wish we had joined you." They were also Jewish, and I didn't know that they were Jewish. And so we got into a conversation of how you are yourself in any job that you have. Again, I didn't plan on being a role model here. I just did what was right for me, and I didn't realize it at the time. Two of the young women there gave me a little nickname of the Sandy Koufax of transportation, which I think is hysterical. So anyway, I kind of forgot about that a little bit, but there's a conference coming up now, and I will have the honor of being in Copenhagen. Again, it is during the week of Yom Kippur. And Linda Greif will be with me, and I've already reached out. I will be spending it with a wonderful Jewish community in Copenhagen, one that has diminished in numbers quite significantly since the Holocaust. They have a whole history, and I've already given them my passport, high security, just like many of our synagogues here. I'm sure it'll be a wonderful experience. But I will also be joined by some of those younger people who were at the first conference and did not figure out a way to observe their holiday. And another bonus, and I just got an email, there are several non-Jewish people who are on our American delegation who broke the fast with me last time, and they've all volunteered to break the fast with me and the others again. So it'll be wonderful, but again, you got to figure out your way, and you don't always know when you're being that role model. Sometimes you're just being yourself.
So I'll answer the question in two ways. One, with respect to my own children, and also the obligation I feel to teach young people in our community and the next generation kind of writ large, whether they be students or people you're training or just your colleagues, just how you spread the word. So our kids, needless to say, grew up in a home where there was a lot of tzedakah going on. There was always a fundraiser. There was always some money put aside to give to others less fortunate. And that was true not only in our own family, but our kids. And I should give a shout out to our synagogue out of Israel in Marion. We have the wonderful Eric Yanov, who's such a treasure in our community. But the kids grew up going to synagogue and being a part of synagogue life and our family life, where tzedakah and giving back to others and following, Jewish tradition was very important. I can remember a story. It always helps to tell a story. My daughter Anna and Sarah actually both went to Penn as well, following our family tradition. And Anna told me that she would go to the library on Sunday nights to prepare for the week. And then on her way back from the library, she would always stop at the Penn Hillel building. Why? What was going on Sunday night? They had not a homeless shelter, a food, like soup kitchen. And people would stop and get sandwiches. And that's what the Hillel building was used for on Sunday night. People would stop and get sandwiches and take them home, I guess, and have them for the week. And she would go and make sandwiches. And I said, "And who are you going with? Are you going with your sorority or your friend?" She said, "No, I just go myself. It's just a way of framing the week for me." And I thought, if I just close my eyes tomorrow, I will have done my job, at least with my older child. And my younger one, Sarah, was very involved as a leader at school and community service, and that was obviously part of the expectation at school. But they both we've encouraged, we've created a family foundation so that we do group decision making about where we give at least a portion of what the money is that we give to Federation and to charities both here and in Israel. So, and also giving back to their schools. So we feel that's a Jewish value that we feel obligated to pass on. But, and I'll just say this about observing the Jewish holiday, since it seems appropriate because it's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur so soon, that when the kids started working at their jobs after college, they were always a little reluctant if the college, or excuse me, if their firm or their company was not closed, the way a lot of schools are closed on the holidays, going in and saying that they wanted to take off the Jewish holiday. They felt, this is a brand new job, I shouldn't go in and ask for the day off, I should be working, I should be showing up, and it does come kind of, when you traditionally start your jobs like in the fall after the summer. And I said to both of my kids, they will respect you more if you go in and say who you are and why it's important to you. And just set that out there right away. Let them know who you are, be proud of it, and if they're not the kind of firm that would just say, of course take the day, then you don't want to work there. You don't want to be part of that community. So we've encouraged them to do that. But I would say as an overall goal, and Stephanie, thank you for the introduction, one of the things that I want my legacy at Jewish Federation to be is that we are building a very strong pipeline of young people, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm now in my 60s, so I can say everybody else is younger than I. That they feel connected to our Jewish community, that everyone feels they have a place here, that we are welcoming. And whether it is, traditional, in-married Jewish couples, interfaith couples, whatever it happens to be, or people who are not married and who want to be participatory and are not part of traditional families, we are here for you. And I feel everyone should know that the 21st century of Judaism is going to be that welcoming place. And so that's how I feel about the next generation.
I don't have any children, but I will speak to all of the medical students and the residents that I have worked with over 3 decades, and all the residents and faculty that I recruit. I mean, you have to live and show your values. So I'll do another baseball. The old Joe DiMaggio quote, when the reporter said to Joe DiMaggio, "Why do you play so hard every day? You have such bad knees." And he said, "Because there's some kid in the stadium today watching me play for the very first time." So as I walk the halls of the hospital and wherever I go, you have to show compassion and empathy. So you have to walk the walk and talk the talk, because people will always be watching you. And then you need to make sure that you can clearly define what your vision is and your mission is, and recruit that. People are always watching. They want to know who you're recruiting and who do you advance in the department or in the residency. So you need to make sure that you build that culture and show that compassion and empathy and caring for one another is really what it's all about.
Other questions? Yes.
So as Jewish women leaders, and for you too, Stephanie, are there any obstacles that you have encountered? And if so, what are they?
Stephanie, you take that first.
As a Jewish person, no, I have not encountered any obstacles about that. As a woman, when I got into TV, there was a big emphasis to try to get more women in television. Back in the day when Walter Cronkite, the networks were all, led by men. So I have not encountered, in my career, issues related to that.
As a Jewish woman lawyer in my generation, I really did not encounter obstacles. If you were good, you were good. You were going to be hired whether you were Jewish, whether you were a woman. It was really just the expectation that if you were excellent and worth having, be any job, admission to any school, as a leader of any organization or club or undertaking. So I feel that I did not encounter those obstacles, but I can't say that's true for everyone. And I can't say that's true for every organization or company or law firm. I happened to choose a firm that was very accepting and was advancing women. And I feel very lucky. There were women partners who preceded me. There were women judges already on the bench. There were women leaders in the Bar Association. And there were women professors at the law school. Not so much undergrad, I have to say. That has changed a lot since the early 70s. And there are now many, many women in academia. And of course, we now have a female president at the University of Pennsylvania. Not the first female president, I should add. So I think, and also Jewish. So I think it's perhaps a generational thing. And I think we're very lucky that we lived in the generation that we lived in, but I'll let each of you speak for yourselves in your fields. But in my particular field, no. I would say in my subspecialty of law, in litigation, there were not that many women litigators. Women tended to maybe choose different specialties in law, so that there were men, older, more experienced male lawyers who maybe thought they could take advantage and exercise perhaps a little unconscious bias, as they say, if not overt bias, and perhaps a judge or two here and there. But for the most part, I feel pretty lucky.
There were, when I was training, not that many women surgeons, not that many women Jewish surgeons. Being a Goldberg, you wear your religion on your sleeve, and I wore it anyway on my sleeve. You know, men at that time didn't think women should be surgeons, and it was a difficult time training. I think the mentor that I had as a resident, I refer to him now affectionately as my mentor, my tour mentor. He gets credit for both. He gets credit for training me how to be a trauma surgeon and inspiring me to be a good trauma surgeon. But it would be incorrect for me not to see the challenges that he put me through. I did work on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I always thought it was Rofei Cholim, so I could.
For sure.
But I'm sure my family would say there are other non-Jewish surgeons that could be working on the Jewish holidays that you could be off. You work Christmas, Amy. You know, that's kind of what I heard. But I think it would have been challenging for me as a young surgeon, or even, you know, as a trainee, to say I'd like off on these days, and I did rationalize it. You know, right now 50% of medical school classes are women. Even within our own residency at Temple, about 45% of our residents are women. I've hired a lot of women surgeons, not at the expense of men, but I've hired a lot of young women surgeons. It's nice to not be the only woman in the room. I've never enjoyed it. Makes me very uncomfortable. You know, the whole queen bee thing didn't work for me. I didn't like it at all. So I'm happy. My young women surgeons are really hard on me. Really, really hard. So I'm gonna have to figure that out a little bit. How to embrace them being hard on me, and how me to smooth their edges out a little bit. They take for granted, to a certain extent, without sounding too crazy, kind of what I've created for them there at Temple. And we'll work that out as we do in all relationships.
Yeah. I don't want to be the negative voice here, but I've had a lot of obstacles. I'm almost always the only woman in the room, whether it's politics, whether it's this job, even in engineering. While I've had people who have completely lifted me up on their shoulders and been so supportive, and I would not be here were it not for them. There have been others that have tried to block that path, and in most ways I've been able to get around them and figure it out. I don't have I don't want to say luxury, but I don't have the pleasure, I should say, of spending most of my days in Philadelphia, which is a very warm and welcoming and a lover of diversity community. I spend most of my days in areas that look very different than this one. Like I said, I'm often, you know, I've lost count of how many times I show up and someone, you know, asks to see my boss, and I have to explain I am the boss, you know. There is no one higher. They're like, well, we're going to go over your head, and I have to explain there's no going over my head. I am the head. I've said that before. I'm not even sure what that means, but, you know, we try to get that across. And no one who looks like me has been in this position before. I'm the 25th Secretary of Transportation, and I passed the 24 white men who have held pictures of them who have held the position going to my office every day. So I'm reminded of that. I mean, I joked with the governor the first time he called me in and it was during an emergency. Called me in with the head of the National Guard, PEMA, state police. I'm the only woman in the room, and only oil paintings of white men staring down at me, all the governors of Pennsylvania. And, you know, afterwards I said, could we meet somewhere else next time? I mean, this was just a lot of testosterone in this room. And, you know, I'm joking. I have a very, very nice relationship with the governor, and, you know, he got it. And it was very early on. It was literally, we had been sworn in, and it was hours later we were dealing with a severe issue. And that was on a Tuesday. I went back to his office that Friday and his office was covered with pictures of his daughters and his wife and other things. And he said to me, "Leslie, I thought you would like to see my newly decorated office." And I said, "Oh, I love it now," and I do, and I love meeting with him. You know, I try to use, you know, my sense of humor to break things up. I'll enter a room. I just entered early in the career a room of 25 male presidents of construction firms that do all of our asphalt and paving and concrete work at PennDOT. They were not so pleased that I had been named in this position. They did not like hearing that I wanted to improve diversity as well as give more contracts to diverse-owned businesses. And they were ready to set me straight. And I walked in the room, and my first comment was, "You didn't have to ask all the women to leave before I got here." And some of them, you know, they didn't know whether I was joking or not, and I didn't let on whether I was joking or not, because these are tough rooms to be in. And it's happened, you know, it's happened on both sides. Sometimes it's a good thing. The story I shared with you about being in Australia, one of the biggest bonuses, and I did get some slack. Not everybody was so happy that I was not. First of all, I was getting a fully paid trip to go to Australia to participate in a conference, and I was missing what was billed as the most important day. And some people were not so happy about that I was still getting paid and fully reimbursed and asked to be part of the delegation, and I was taking a place of somebody else who could have gone and fully participated. One thing that happened afterwards that made me feel really good, sometimes you get these nice rewards afterwards, is that the Australia delegation, that would be the equivalent of USDOT, you know, the federal organization, they then took a trip to the United States, and they chose to only stop in 2 states, and they chose to stop in Pennsylvania, and they mentioned my name for being one of the reasons why they chose to stop. So the naysayers who I work with, and they're my colleagues, and it's very hard when the people are, you know, sometimes they are, they're other DOT secretaries in other states, and they can say things that really are offensive and hurt, and you can't say much about it. As you can imagine, some of them are appointed by some very severe governors who want certain people in their cabinets, and these are the people that I need to work with. So I do feel sometimes like I get kicked in the stomach, and I have to just, you know, stiffen up and take it. And there are times when I can do good things, and there are times that I can't. But it's wonderful having networks, whether it's at my county level, at the state level, and nationally as well. When I have some issues that I can't talk about, I have a great group of friends who are very supportive. But it's, you win some. You win more, you know, as you get to certain levels of things, but sometimes it's an awakening. It's not such a welcoming world out there all the time.
Yeah, I just wanted to add thank you both for the insight on the answer to that very good question. I don't want to paint the picture darker than it needs to be, but also not as rosy as it isn't, okay? And I used to joke with a friend who was at my law firm, where we both kind of grew up as young lawyers, that in today's world of the Me Too movement, we could actually raise our hands and say, not me, because nothing like that happened at our law firm that I was aware of. But again, there could have been things that I wasn't aware of, right? I mean, the worst it ever got was somebody told an inappropriate joke, which I'm sure in the OR you must have heard a few of those. And, you kind of wince and you think, well, this wasn't really appropriate for anybody to tell in any kind of company. But that's kind of as bad as it got in my law firm that I was aware of. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean that as Jews and as leaders and as women leaders in particular, that we should not always be thinking about ways in which we have to improve all of those relationships in the workplace, and not only in the workplace, right? I was listening to the radio on the way here today, and workplace harassment, and it was Kavanaugh who's testifying now to be approved by the Senate on his nomination to the Supreme Court, and all of his law clerks have written in, all of his female law clerks in particular have written in to support his candidacy, and talking about workplace harassment, and that is an important conversation, and we do that at Jewish Federation. We advise synagogues, we advise all of our agencies, the programs that we fund. Everyone has to be educated in appropriate workplace behavior, but it's also in our personal relationships, right? And we have 2 daughters, and we all know sexual harassment is rampant on college campuses. aggravated by drugs and alcohol. And the climate has really changed. And I think that it's not just a Jewish problem, but I think as members of the Jewish community, we have an obligation to call it out and to do something about it and to learn from it.
And I'll add one more thing. The fact of the matter is pay inequity is still alive and well. It's gotten better, but women are across the board paid less than men for comparable positions. That's certainly the case in my industry, and I'm sure many others. So that's certainly a path that we can continue to forge ahead with. Other questions?
I'm not sure I should ask this question, but I'll be brave. You have an IRA, and my wife has an IRA, and she's going to become a very, very famous author very soon. As it is, when I go places, I'm becoming second fiddle, I feel, because I'm with her gang. And not only for Ira, but also for the other two, how does he handle this thing? How do you help him handle the fact that, you're the boss in such a big job?
My husband's gotten very used to being called Mr. Stahl, and that's not his last name. And he's fine with it. Go ahead.
Look, for me, our family's always been a team. I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and I supported my husband. He had his own firm for a while. He's a partner in a big firm, and so we've figured it out. But we talk about it all the time, and it is difficult. And I'm very conscious of it. Always include him, when certain things are happening. When I ran for township supervisor and the sign said, two names and then Richards, everyone assumed it was Ira Richards. And even his mother came to visit us and said, Ira, I didn't know that you were running for supervisor. And he said, it's not me, Mom. Leslie's running for supervisor. So we go, but I'm very conscious of it. I try to be as sensitive. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I need to do better and remember. And also when I'm in groups, so I'm trying to help, and I'm pretty outspoken about it. When I go on conventions and conferences, I'm going to be with one with all the DOT secretaries around the country. The spouse trips are to spas, to shopping, and everyone's like, well, Leslie, why doesn't your husband ever come? I'm like, while my husband loves a massage, and that's not all he likes to do, and it can be uncomfortable. So I try to speak up about that. There's only a handful of us who are women, but it speaks to women who would like to bring another woman, with them, or men who would like to bring another man with them as well. So, I really try to speak up about it, but I do try to be sensitive, and I will acknowledge sometimes I'm better at it than others. If anyone else has anything.
Yeah, I have a spouse. He's very supportive. He does not love to go to events. So he would much prefer to spend time with himself, our dog, or our children. So he's very happy for me to go off and do my thing. And there are very few things that I ask of him other than being my campaign chair, Melissa. When I asked Dean to be my campaign chair and I'm not a brand new Federation board chair. This is my second year of a 3-year term. We had the benefit of having David and Rhonda Cohen as our co-chairs last year, and I wanted to have another prominent member of the community, and I've been pestering my husband for a suggestion, and I finally just said, well, just why don't you do it? You get it, your people will respect you, and they'll take your endorsement as having additional confidence in the organization and help other people to give and to give more. And he said yes, but on the way home to be asking him, I said to Melissa, what do you think about me asking Dean? She said, well, if you need any help recruiting him, let me know. So he's been great. Yes, I mean, there are nights that he, I'm sure, wished he had a little more time with me. But in the days when he was traveling and building his business, I was there on the home front. So it all shakes out. And I think even if some of us don't have spouses, and not everybody does, or somebody may have a spouse who's passed away, or their marriage ends in divorce, or where people don't get married, there is always a network of people around you that probably wish they had more of you. Like your parents saying, why aren't you home on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? And there I am in the operating room doing the mitzvah of Rofei Cholim, because work just takes a lot of time. And anything worth doing, anything really challenging takes a lot of time. So I think that's the premium here. So we all do our best to build up a reservoir of goodwill with your partner, because you may need it back.
I would say be very supportive of her and enjoy her success. It's your
Yes,
success too.
yes, and good luck with that.
You had a question? I did. I guess particularly being a young woman in the workplace, I can't say I've had any issues getting in the room, but then once you're in the room and you're the only woman there, it's definitely tough, particularly being really young. Any recommendations for like getting respect once you're in that room with a bunch of 50-plus old white men? How to get them to take you serious? I mean,
I didn't hear what.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Just feeling like you're.
I
they look at you like someone's
I
watching.
do, because I mean, even though it was a while ago that I was very young, but I still feel young. I've been there. I would say, first of all, whenever you get the opportunity, speak up. Never be in a room, even when you're the only woman, and don't say anything. I mean, think about what you want to say. Your voice is important. How you say it is important, and don't think that you have nothing to add to a conversation. I've personally made that mistake, and thank goodness I had good friends who pointed it out to me. Many who were in the media, by the way, when I was in politics, I would often let the male politicians speak up, and if they already said the points that I was going to make, I chose to say nothing, thinking I don't want to waste people's time. But it was actually a male reporter who came up to me from a major station here in Philadelphia and said, when you say something, you say it in a different way, and your voice, what you have to say is important. People need to hear you say it, and we need to hear it said in a different voice from someone who's had different experiences, being a daughter, being an aunt, being a niece, being a mother, being, someone who has different experiences than some of my male colleagues. So that's really important to know. And a piece of advice that I'd like to give everyone, if you find yourself in a situation where you're never being heard, you're not being promoted, you really feel like you're being kept down because there's nowhere to go, you can change that circumstance. You don't have to stay in a situation that is not nurturing for you and is not helpful. There are many places who would welcome your talents, and don't feel stuck in a situation. You don't have to break every glass ceiling that is over your head, right? You do your best, and after you try several times, if it seems like an impossible task or a not fun task or something that you don't want to do, change your view. Look at another glass ceiling and break that one, because there are a lot of choices, and other people will help you do that. Also, you can ask your male colleagues. There are a lot of people. I'm here because a lot of white men, my husband, the governor, others, have helped me and believed in me, and they have really been supportive. So also ask for help. You don't have to do it by yourself.
The one piece of advice, two pieces of advice I would give to, if you're the only A, female, B, in your demographic, right? You're saying say younger than whomever is in the room. One is, and the advice was given to me early on as a young lawyer, if you are that person in the room, just don't be taking notes, okay? Because they're just going to assume that you're the secretary. And we all know that there are male secretaries out there, so I don't mean to be sexist about who secretaries are, but eye contact, right? Just don't be the note taker, because then you're not participating in the same way, and you'll see maybe somebody jot down a note, and in today's world on an iPad or a laptop or whatever. But I think that being engaged and being vocal is important. The second is, no matter what business or organization anybody is in who is older than you, you are the customer. Your generation, the people who were younger than you, are generally the demographic that everybody's most interested in. It just seems like, how are we going to gauge the next generation? Who are our customers of whatever it is? Who do we want to be voting? That voting block is really important. So the voice of your generation in the workplace is really, really important in your perspective. Even if you're new at what you're doing, you're still articulating that.
I think developing good communication skills is really very, very important. When you learn how to speak in front of people, even if it's, in a room, like my heart will start pounding, because I'm getting ready to say something. But I think if you can really just work on your communication skills and be confident and carry yourself well, look in people's eyes, I think
Don't
that
back
helps.
down.
Yeah.
You deserve to be there.
Don't.
I think this is wrapping up our session for questions, and I think Secretary Richards is going to come up and wrap this up. Sure.
I was asked just to give closing remarks, and again, thank you so much for being here. If anyone knows differently, is this the first time someone from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation has spoken to this group? Because it could be, right? You all have a friend at PennDOT, so if we can help you in any way, these discussions are extremely important. It was great to get to know Susanna and Amy, to meet you, Amy, and to get to know you better. But I'm always impressed, and we all have different stories to tell. And so, you know, building on that last comment, we do all have stories to tell. And one thing I have learned throughout my career is that one of the best things we can do is to share our stories and to show our vulnerabilities and to let other people know that this is not so easy, and we have issues as well. I'll end it with something that a friend had told me, and it was when I was running, I had just won as county commissioner, big deal. And I was trying to do that job. I was trying to be present as a mother of 3 people who were still living in the house. I missed I was about to miss a concert, an oboe concert that my youngest daughter was in, and she hated playing the oboe, so to her it was not a big deal. To me, big deal. She needed a white pressed shirt. She needed like all these things that I had forgotten. And after a big day at work and doing what I had to do, I found myself in the kitchen circling the island, trying to figure out, how was I going to balance all of these things. And a friend happened to call me, and I told her the predicament. I couldn't even think straight. I know it sounds like kind of a silly situation, but I think we've all had these situations, right? We don't feel like we're doing the work part, well, and we don't feel like we're doing the parent part well, or taking care of our parents well, or being a good sibling, or whatever it is that we do. She said to me, "Don't you dare do this job perfectly. If you do it perfectly and show up at every single event, whether it be political, whether it be for your governing job, whether it be as a parent, whether it be for the PTO, there won't be another woman who will ever think that they should run for office while being a parent, while taking care of their parents, while doing other things." And you know what? It was really good advice. And so I like to repeat that to everybody. None of us are perfect. When we don't do things perfectly, share it with others. I mean, what makes us feel better than realizing when we've had a challenge that other people have had that same challenge, and we all work through it? Always ask for help. The other story that I like to end with, sometimes it's really a simple thing. When I was running, I was getting ready for my very first debate, going to the bus stop, and I heard my kids talking to each other, and someone saying, "Hey, does anyone have a clean pair of socks?" And my son was telling, my 7th grade son was telling my 3rd grade daughter, "Just turn them inside out." And I realized, maybe I'm not really kicking this, to the park like I thought I was. And I shared that with the other parents at the bus stop, and the next time they showed up with a Target bag of dozens of socks for all of my children, as well as clean underwear. And you never know, the tiniest things help each other, right? We're not in this alone. It's an issue that we all should be working on together, and it's much more fun when we all work it together. So buy some clean socks and underwear for someone you know. It can really help them. Having clean laundry is extremely powerful. Sharing your stories is completely powerful. And really trust your own voice. And we are all here to help each other. So thank you so much for inviting us and spending your lunch hour with us. And thank you so much to the panelists. And I want to give a special thanks to Stephanie. I was saying it earlier. I really think her presence here just elevated the discussion in so many ways. So thank you for giving of your time. I know you are all very busy. We're all very busy, and we appreciate you being here as well. So thank you.